Hello, welcome to another episode of Full Circle with me, Onyx. And today I have some notes. Continuing on with our magical training in disguise, our discussions, our talk about all things magical. Um, I've just kind of, getting information, and this week I was kind of exploring, becoming more aware of how I actually think, how I actually get intuitive things going on. Like, how do I understand and process life? And I notice I kind of have this sense, a trust that if I just let go and, put it on the back burner, then whatever information will somehow get processed through my subconscious and the answer will arise to my consciousness. An answer will pop out of the oven, be like, oh, that's why they did that. Oh, that's what I should do. Oh, okay. And so I feel like learning how to actually not think, learning how to take in information. It might come through a challenging experience, like maybe you were magically attacked or someone was confrontational with you and you're like, oh my God, why did that happen? Or, instead of like trying to think about it, just set it to the side and let your subconscious or the other parts of your consciousness put it all together for you. No effort, no work. Like I think we fail to realize that consciousness and our mind is not our brain and it's not our body. It's literally a field of energy. Uh, you know, and so its capabilities exceed your own understanding, especially if you really keep pointing to your own physical body as I, as me, my journey, my life. Like, we get so stuck in our avatar. Like, even with, like, I call it false spirituality, where they're saying, oh, the pineal gland, breathe, do some Wim Hof breathing, and, open up your pineal gland, and they're focusing once again on the object, the physical body, you know. So we keep rooting ourselves into the five senses. And there has to get you move so far along on your magical spiritual journey, whatever you want to call it, uh where you realize all paths are one, whatever this journey, this experience. And there's a point where you just have to kind of let go. Kind of lost my and let lose your five senses. Like, if information is coming to you through your five senses, there's a point where you have to just say, those are limited. No matter how much I hear, no matter how much I see, no matter how much I feel, it's only going to give me that dimension of understanding, of infinity. So we're, and so you have to go back and forth between this 3D reality and a fifth dimensional reality. Yeah, and both have two different ways of sensing and experiencing the infinite natures of existence. So that might have been a lot for someone, and that's very advanced. So let's bring it back down. Because really, I was trying to explain myself. And I feel like it's hard for some people to follow along. Uh, when you don't have the puzzle pieces to figure it out. So that information may not be for you. That could be, set aside. You know, that's a puzzle piece. And when other puzzle pieces come to you, then you'll be able to lock them together and see more of the picture. But, anyways, moving on. So, in my last videos, we talked about magical attacks and, whatever that was. I went to a new age store, grabbed some crystals, and this lady who's like possessed with her shadow self is having a meltdown, and then she enlists a friend, and the friend is immature witch, trapped in like a 60-year-old body. So anyways, a little magical warfare went down, and it really surprises me that the most basic magic, you know drawing a symbol with your intention on it, usually will defeat most people who pride themselves as witches, most people who pride themselves as energy workers, magical practitioners, whatever you want to call it, with all this knowledge. You can just simply spell it out what you want, make a symbol of it, and let it go and watch it happen. So why all the extra stuff? So one part of my personality is I'm looking at things, kind of gently picking it apart. What are the mechanics behind this? And so there was a point where I had to let it go. I was like, just let it go. Do what you always do. Set it in a cauldron, set it to the side, let your subconscious work it out, and present you with the information. Uh, Now that I'm in my late 40s, oh my God, late 40s, here we are. I keep thinking I'm like 20. uh, you're thinking about, okay, I'm going to move on past planet Earth. I'm going to ascend. I'm going to, whatever that, reincarnate. So, what is important to me? Is it saying stuck in 3 dimensions with other people? Or do I want to move on? What is actually of service? You know? And so, that was one of the questions that comes up. Morality, ethics, spirituality, intention. How do you see the universe? How do you see yourself? So we went from a very basic skirmish to a very big spiritual context or perspective. And fundamentally, I know this is my journey. And one student that I had at one point uh, asked me, what is a spiritual warrior? And I would say that's the defining thing. Like a hustler attitude towards spirituality would be a spiritual warrior. A spiritual warrior looks at conflict as an opportunity to grow. Going through the alchemy fires of transformation, fire and water, build that samurai sword, breaking down the impurities through the hammering and firing process. And so pain isn't, uh, needless pain isn't welcome. But pain as it happens, you welcome it. Death, you welcome it. The challenge, you welcome it. You welcome it. So there's really no room for a victim or a martyr mentality that religion and I call soft spirituality supports. No soft meaning of life and your angels are guiding you and this is all great. That's very watered down, very soft, very much spiritual bypassing. Instead of, yes, that hurt and you were at risk. Your life was in danger. And yes, that was really stupid. And those stupid things, which threw, out of the frying pan into the fire, was a necessary step or a necessary evil. Why do we have evil in the world? Why do we have villains? We don't turn a blind eye to it we honor it, we recognize it, uh, but then we also pick our battles. Am I being served? How am I being served? As long as you're getting something out of it, I would say then it was a necessary, a fruitful endeavor. It wasn't in vain. So we're looking at uh, engagement. So two conflicts happened, and they happened with people who have a lot of Cancer energy. If you know your astrology, some basic astrology, you start to understand Cancer experiences themselves or life through their emotional lens. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of things distorted through an emotional lens. And when you really start understanding Pisces, Pisces experiences life through an intellectual lens and an emotional lens. So they have both. And when you start to understand Cancer energy is here for planet Earth, it's that nurturing energy, community building, tribe building. So they're going to be horizontal about a lot of things. And that goes down to their values, what they want out of life versus Pisces. Pisces is like, get me out of here. Why am I here? I want to ascend to the fifth dimension. So Pisces is like exiting the story, the phantom ghost, kind of a watcher, doesn't want to get so involved, where Cancer wants involvement. They want an emotional exchange. They want all exchanges and even physical exchanges. So, some of my best friends have been Cancers, and interesting enough, you know, probably TMI, but there is this guy I really liked. I think he was a Virgo with a Cancer moon, or the other way around. Anyways, he died. Uh, and years later, I'm thinking about him, and I'm like, you know what? Even though those are the two signs I usually have a prejudice towards, I think I was wrong. I think that person was an ideal mate. And so I'm just putting it out there that I can have a change of heart, I can change my belief system, I can change my attitude towards the signs, energies, and the people who are being forced to work with those energies. So I would say you're not really your sign, but unfortunately, we're experiencing, we're all, that energy is with you during this life, and it's part of the filter system. So we just have to work with it. Every sign has pros and cons, but Cancer sign, a fourth house placement, Scorpio sign, eighth house placements, are more involved with people and things. And they both have security stuff, which is different than Pisces. Pisces is like the oddball. Pisces is like, no, material things don't mean anything. You know, stuff, face value stuff, ego stuff doesn't mean anything. Where I would say the other 11 signs, ego means more, and the world, the physical world, means more. And so I think one of Pisces' biggest challenges is to get back into the world, you know? Even though they want to go the opposite direction, it might be a tug of war, it might be a fight to get them back into the world. So I'm just using astrology to explain some stuff, because when we're looking at motives, why people do things, what is their intention? What do they want? Some people, it blows my mind. Some people want attention. Some people want praise. Some people want validation. Some people want intimacy, like touch and hugs and closeness. Like a lot of those things, I can have small amounts, is enough. Like, yes, those are all necessary, but we all have a different ratio of how much we need in order to feel balanced, in order to feel safe, in order to feel whatever it is that we need to feel. And when we don't get it, we might get into conflicts. So, after I put all that stuff on the back burner, and I did a few sigils, uh, I'm just going to say destroyed them. And really, it was just return their energy to themselves, and the little spell that one of them did uh quickly, didn't work. It just kind of broke. It just kind of disintegrated. Um and then I was like, I know there's more to this. And one of the crystals that I bought, since I was dumb, I let them process it, go to the register, hand it over, they look up the price, they turn it in. It was handled by them, so it came back to me dirty, like with some negative intentions and whatever, so just done some cleansing and whatever. And something was still in it. Something was still kind of like wrong, like twisted. I was like, this is interesting. I'm like, do we go into fear? Or what do we do with this? Do we just throw it away? This gift of nature? Do we give it to someone else? Uh, or do we work with it and then learn to like it? You know, eat your demons. Is this a psychological thing to work out, or is this an actual thing to, like, is this gone supernatural now? And I was like, okay. Every time I handle this crystal, I get crazy messed up vibes. So I was like, let's just leave it for a while. And I feel like this is really important. Patience. Setting things aside is kind of like been a principle here. And I feel like you move into higher magic when you start seeing things as principles and mechanics, uh, and a process. You start understanding what you're going through, and that's how you learn. So, did all sorts of stuff with it. Finally, I ended up giving it away. Uh, but it wasn't until after of just kind of sitting there doing other things and letting the information flow, I was like, why did I see that like worm entity with all those teeth? Why did that show up so clearly in the space? Why did I feel like she stuck me in her second chakra unknowingly? Like she put me in her womb in order to do battle. Like, oh, that's how she cast her magic circle. A lot of people cast through their second chakra. A lot of lower energy is through the second chakra, which is ruled by the moon and the emotions. And I was like, but why was the vision of the entity not powerful? I was like, oh, that's a creation that was like imaginary. Like, and I fought people who use a lot of thought form creation, and there's usually not a lot of energy or an effect because most of that energy went into building the thought form. So even though it looked like a giant worm with all these teeth, it had no power behind it. So I'm like, interesting. And then I was like, oh yeah, once upon a time when we were associating as friends, because usually the only people who are actually ever going to magically attack you is someone who knows you, you know? So, and then there's that breach of boundaries. Anyways, so I was like, oh yeah, she was really into dude. And then she was all something the mind killer, or like she was getting off on it. Like she was trying to find her power through a myth story like that, And I was like, okay, that really wasn't the entity that I suspected. So just setting it aside, the illusion popped. The delusion popped. And I was able to sort it out. I was like, this was what she did, how she did it. This was the limits of her power. And these were the dimensions she was working on. I'm like, well, why did I see that? And I'm like, well, I do work on 3 or 4 different dimensions. It's not hard. I'm there all the time. I'm there. I'm working in 3 dimensions at once, awake. Like, I don't have to be in a certain space to do it. I am it. So I'm like, oh, okay. And so then I was like, well, what about this weird energy that just never left the crystal? Well, guess what? My intuition told me someone else came into the store, touched all the crystals in there, who, like, maybe had done some really intense negative drugs, and whatever entities, whatever twisting stuff was going on, it was all unconscious, you know, but it happened through this other person. And I was like, wow, there was a mystery element to this situation. And it had nothing to do with these two low level witches, had nothing to do with us. It had something to do with a random so called customer who happened just to handle that particular crystal that I happened to buy. And so then it really put things into perspective. And I was like, okay, mystery solved. Now I can give this crystal away, I can shut the door on it, and move on with my life. Because it seems like everyone's forgetting I have a life too that doesn't include which is a master of my domain and the understanding of spheres. You're in your own personal bubble. The environment is a bubble. Other people are bubbles. And when you get into enmeshment, transference and countertransference, simple psychology, then situations happen. So, so what were the takeaways through this self-reflection? Don't take shit personal. Don't take shit personal. And you don't know everything. Like, you can't know everything. So it's a really good idea to just wait. It's a really good idea to just be slow about it. Kind of like an operation. Layer by layer, peel these things back. And another takeaway is you really can't do magic without some level of intuition guiding you, bringing you to these inner truths. There is no way I can say, oh, there is another person. That's just a story, you know, unless you're really connected to your intuition. You can trust your intuition and yourself enough, trust your own mind to figure it out. Trust your own intuition. Trust yourself that you have a knack for solving facts, for finding evidence where there is none. Bridge those gaps, intuitively make those leaps of consciousness to understand things. Spell it out, read it, understand it on an intuitive level. And then, you know, and then also move on. It's like, so there was a lot with that. And we didn't even really get into what I wanted to talk about with this video. Uh, so then, so then I was like, I find with YouTube and videos, it's so much easier to do research. I didn't know I do research. Research sounds like a big word, I'm really just curious. I want to know how things work. I didn't know, oh, Onyx, you spend hours researching the occult. Yeah, well, it's fascinating. It's interesting. So I got on this lady's channel, and, she says she's a demonologist. And she's a witch. But then she says, well, I'm not exactly a witch. I'm more of a demonologist. My power is, sensing bad energy and the ability to remove it. Then she went into a story about a low-level witch who's given her psychic problems. And I was like, okay, we all have an ideal version of ourselves. We have a self-concept. We have this idea of who we want to be, idea of who we think we are, and then the actual reality of it. And it's delusional to keep assuming you're something that you're not. Like, you could say, I'm working on it, I'm becoming it, I'm birthing it, I'm revealing this potential in me, but I'm not really that, you know? So, because why would a low level witch, one of her probably ex students, uh, be able to best her, you know, if she was truly a demonologist? Like, The one way to defeat a witch is actually with demons, period. And there's real reasons why. So I always laugh when someone says, "Oh, I bound a demon." I'm like, really? And this is a big subject because just like the rainbow of many colors, there's different levels of demons. And the low level demons is actually a human being. Sorry, everyone. If you're carrying around negativity and you're unconscious about what you're saying, like, oh, I wish that person would die, or why don't they get in a car wreck, or, you know, when you're saying these things, you're putting it out there. So a lot of us are very loose with our negative power of the word, and that's black magic. That's what you're creating, and it's giving you a sense of relief, which you interpret as pleasure. That's demonic. So really, the first level of demon is human, and then a little more advanced is actually the negative person that's died. Those are the people who are usually supposedly helping you with your tarot and with your Ouija board, and that's why things are always weird. When things are weird, the energy's weird, you're usually dealing with like the energy of a dead person. And the negative part of their ego lives on. And Carl Jung, whatever you'd like to call him, talked about the collective evil. So if humans were just patterns, we're like a fractal. Triangles can fit within triangles, can fit within triangles. They can expand and they'll all equal the same sides, you know, and they'll all be perfect measurements, just pyramids within pyramids within pyramids. You as an individual are one, but there's a bigger pyramid, and that would be your mother and your father in you. Then there's a bigger pyramid, that would be your grandparents and your parents and their parents. And so you see that reproduction is fractal. And so when you really expand it out, humanity is one conscious entity with many hands, many eyes, many hearts. And so we collectively create cities, worlds, towns, homes, jobs. We group up into little fractal units, bigger fractal units, bubbles, circles. And so the collective, so a lot of extra power that people are working with, they're just using a symbol to tap into the collective evil. When someone maybe is possessed with an emotion and they do something kind of out of character, could actually be fueled by the archetypes of evil. The archetypes of evil are just doors to that energy. So they're like three-dimensional holographic living symbols. And they're interactive with you. So when you're channeling an angel or channeling a demon, whatever, you're dialing into that type of energy, and the source of that energy is actually all of us. So very fascinating on how to amp up your power. Uh, so we see that there needs to be a lot of knowledge. If you're going to be extending yourself beyond the basics, you should be able to handle yourself with the basics, which was really what I want to go into this video about, but I had to kind of explain where it's coming from. So maybe this will be like the vlog version. But basically, when we bring magic down to its nuts and bolts, when we strip away the gods, when we strip away the plants and the herbs and the magical Latin words, in nomine Padre, El Filius, Spiritus Sancti, Ave Mille Spiritus, Ave Mille Spiritus. When we strip away the religious rituals, the so-called magic words, Yod He Vod He, and all the stars and the pentagrams and the hexagrams and we strip away these religious iconic tones, symbols, words, letters, numbers, patterns. We come down to pure intent, and we come down to you. So, in a weird way, developing you is how you create a really powerful witch or a wizard or whatever it is, a businessman, a sports person. Everything else is ritual and process and commitment. And when we look at battles, it's going against this image you have of yourself. So people who are going to get offended over a certain word, like my sister, it offends this idea she has in her head that she's like religious. And so that must be bad. And then this must be good. And fighting for what's right is good. So you must be bad. You must be the villain. See how childish this black and white, good, bad thinking is? So her deep need to see herself as good puts her in a position to then be offended. When you put yourself in a position to be right, you know? And it gives her a sense of purpose, you know? And so we are defending an image of ourselves, and we don't like it when other people are presenting us with other images. You know, mainstream culture is presenting us with the image of technology and future, globalization, AI technology, robots, and crazy wild science. And I'm like, you know what? Humans have existed just fine without any of this. You know, so there'll be some people who are offended, people who are not on board with AI, you know, and cell phones and all this stuff. Like, so some people get offended over skin color. Some people get offended over beliefs or rules, you know, and they go to war, waste a whole bunch of energy. Wouldn't it be nice to maybe remove yourself from that? That's what Pisces does. We just kind of remove ourselves from all that. You know, we like basically ascend. But so it's good to, in your downtime when you're not fighting, instead of doing rituals, probably develop you, gain a skill, becoming a functional member of society, balance it out so you don't get too far left into magical world or too far right into atheist, non-magical. There's room for both. We can coexist, you know.